You notice something interesting here. So when we went back, let's go back here. When we say var name, in fact, let's just get rid of this. Okay, so let's use the val. I'm just going to change this to name. Of course, this is going to have some issues. Name like that. Okay, when we do this, we say val name is equal to John. What are we doing here? We are assigning this val variable to John, to something. Okay, so we are initializing, that's the lingo we use in programming. We're initializing this variable to hold something in memory. But there are different ways to initialize a variable. So variables must be initialized to something before they're used. What I mean by that is that I obviously cannot just have something like that and go down and say name is equal to James. Okay, first of all, this is immutable, so this is not going to work. But even if I change this to var to make it mutable, we're still going to have a problem because you're going to say this variable must either have a type annotation or be initialized. What does that really mean? Okay, well, that means if we want to initialize in a different way our val James, we don't want to add anything or to initialize with a string, right? In this case, there is another way to initialize a variable, okay, which is a little bit more explicit. Explicit in the sense that we are going to tell the compiler what type of the variable this is, meaning what kinds of objects or of things, quote unquote, this variable is going to hold. So if I say val name and then I put colon like this and I say string, okay, like that, then I have less problems. Let's hover over. The variable name must be initialized. So even though I have said that the type that are expected to be inside of our name is going to be string type. So this is a type meaning what kind of contents are expected to be held in the val name. We still have to do some more work to initialize it, which means even though we said what type, we need to say, okay, we initialize with something, so it's not nothing. Okay, so here I'm going to say James, for instance. Okay, this is one way of doing it. Now, you notice we have an issue here, or not an issue, I should say. It's just a recommendation. Notice that string looks grayed out. What does that mean? If you hover over, it says explicitly given type is redundant here. It's redundant because it's saying, well, yeah, if you put James in double quotes, I know, being in the compiler, that this is indeed a string. So you don't really need to do this. But in the back end, that's what the compiler is doing. It's explicitly, it will know exactly what type is expected for val. So I can just get rid of that altogether and go back to what we had. Okay. So, but I wanted to show you different ways to initialize a variable, even though the compiler is smart enough to say, okay, that is not needed because I will infer from what we're setting that this obviously is a string. That is another concept when it comes to initializing variables in Kotlin. Now, the other thing is, even though, let's go back to what we had before. I'm going to say string is equal to James. Even though this compiler says this is redundant, I want you to think in those terms, at least to have a picture image in your head, because you will see once we talk about advanced concepts in Kotlin, such as classes and objects and so forth, you will see that this is going to be more apparent when you are declaring variables or instantiating objects. We'll get there, but I just wanted to get started so you know how to read this. What this means is create a variable in memory called name, and it's going to be immutable, which means you cannot mutate it or change it. And the types that are expected to be held in that variable are going to be string types. And then I'm going to initialize. For the first thing that this variable is going to have is the string James. Okay?